Left-Wing Communism, an Infantile Disorder. Section. In what sense can we speak of the international significance of the Russian Revolution? In the first months after the proletariat in Russia had won political power, October 25th and November 7th, 1917, it might have seemed that the enormous difference between backward Russia and the advanced countries of Western Europe would lead to the proletarian revolution in the latter countries bearing very little resemblance to ours. We now possess quite considerable international experience, which shows very definitely that certain fundamental features of our revolution have a significance that is not local, or peculiarly national, or Russian alone, but international. I am not speaking here of international significance in the broad sense of the term. Not merely several, but all the primary features of our revolution, and many of its secondary features, are of international significance in the meaning of its effect on all countries. I am speaking of it in the narrowest sense of the word, taking international significance to mean the international validity or the historical inevitability of a repetition, on an international scale, of what has taken place in our country. It must be admitted that certain fundamental features of our revolution do possess that significance. It would, of course, be grossly erroneous to exaggerate this truth and to extend it beyond certain fundamental features of our revolution. It would also be erroneous to lose sight of the fact that, soon after the victory of the proletarian revolution in at least one of the advanced countries, a sharp change will probably come about. Russia will cease to be the model and will once again become a backward country, in the Soviet and socialist sense. At the present moment in history, however, it is the Russian model that reveals to all countries something, and something highly significant, of their near and inevitable future. Advanced workers in all lands have long realized this. More often than not, they have grasped it with their revolutionary class instinct, rather than realized it. Herein lies the international, quote, significance, in the narrow sense of the word, of Soviet power, and of the fundamentals of Bolshevik theory and tactics. The, quote, revolutionary leaders of the Second International, such as Kautsky in Germany, and Otto Bauer, and Friedrich Adler in Austria, have failed to understand this, which is why they have proved to be reactionaries and advocates of the worst kind of opportunism and social treachery. Incidentally, the anonymous pamphlet entitled The World Revolution, Weltrevolution, which appeared in Vienna in 1919, Socialiste Bücherei, very clearly reveals their entire thinking and their entire range of ideas, or rather, the full extent of their stupidity, pedantry, baseness, and betrayal of working-class interests. And that, moreover, under the guise of, quote, defending the idea of, quote, world revolution. We shall, however, deal with this pamphlet in greater detail some other time. We shall here note only one more point. In bygone days, when he was still a Marxist and not a renegade, Kautsky, dealing with the question as an historian, foresaw the possibility of a situation arising in which the revolutionary spirit of the Russian proletariat would provide a model to Western Europe. This was in 1902, when Kautsky wrote an article for the revolutionary Iskra, entitled, quote, The Slavs and the Revolution. Here is what he wrote in the article. Beginning of quote. At the present time, in contrast with 1848, it would seem that not only have the Slavs entered the ranks of the revolutionary nations, but that the center of revolutionary thought and revolutionary action is shifting more and more to the Slavs. The revolutionary center is shifting from the west to the east. In the first half of the 19th century, it was located in France, at times in England. In 1848, Germany too joined the ranks of the revolutionary nations. The new century has begun with events which suggest the idea that we are approaching a further shift of the revolutionary center, namely to Russia. Russia, which has borrowed so much revolutionary initiative from the West, is now perhaps herself ready to serve the West as a source of revolutionary energy. The Russian revolutionary movement that is now flaring up will perhaps prove to be the most potent means of exercising the spirit of flabby Philistinism and coldly calculating politics that is beginning to spread in our midst. And it may cause the fighting spirit and the passionate devotion to our great ideals to flare up again. To Western Europe, Russia has long ceased to be a bulwark of reaction and absolutism. I think the reverse is true today. Western Europe is becoming Russia's bulwark of reaction and absolutism. The Russian revolutionaries might perhaps have coped with the Tsar long ago had they not been compelled at the same time to fight this ally, European capital. Let us hope that this time they will succeed in coping with both enemies, and that the new, quote, Holy Alliance will collapse more rapidly than its predecessors did. However, the present struggle in Russia may end. The blood and suffering of the martyrs whom, unfortunately, it will produce in too great numbers will not have been in vain. They will nourish the shoots of social revolution throughout the civilized world and make them grow more luxuriantly and rapidly. In 1848, the Slavs were a killing frost which blighted the flowers of the people's spring. Perhaps they are now destined to be the storm that will break the ice of reaction and irresistibly bring with them a new and happy spring for the nations. End quote by Kautsky. From The Slavs and Revolution, Iskra, Russian Social Democratic Revolutionary Newspaper, 1902. End quote. How well Karl Kautsky wrote 18 years ago. End of section.